Marcus stood where he always stood during imperial ceremonies, which was to say nowhere important. The back of the Hall of Continuance curved upward like the inside of a vast shell, its walls threaded with slow-moving bands of light that responded to planetary tides rather than applause. The floor beneath his boots adjusted its temperature to the combined body heat of the crowd, a thoughtful feature he appreciated more than most, given how long these events lasted. He had once calculated that if all state functions were converted into medical waiting rooms, patient survival rates would improve dramatically through forced endurance alone. He folded his hands behind his back and reminded himself to look attentive. The court valued appearances, and the appearance of attentiveness was far easier than the real thing. Around him, officials whispered in 12 registered dialects, while their translators hummed softly at their throats, occasionally mistranslating an insult into a compliment or vice versa. Marcus had learned not to intervene unless blood was involved. Diplomatic bleeding counted, but only if it was literal. At the far end of the hall, elevated on a dais grown from a single piece of living crystal, sat Empress Solenne. Distance softened nothing about her presence. She looked human at first glance, as most of her kind did, but her long ears swept back in elegant arcs that caught the hall's light and refracted it into pale gold. They were still now, perfectly composed like the rest of her. The throne responded subtly to her breathing, adjusting its shape to support her spine, a luxury Marcus privately believed caused more back problems than it solved. He had treated 3 minor nobles earlier that week for ceremonial fainting, a condition with no known cure except shorter speeches. Today's address had already passed the point where time lost meaning. Marcus listened with half an ear, tracking the speech's progress by the number of metaphors involving stars, unity, and unavoidable destiny. When the speaker reached destiny twice in the same sentence, Marcus allowed himself a small internal cheer. It meant the end was near. He shifted his weight and felt the faint vibration of the hall's environmental systems recalibrating. Somewhere deep below, machines older than recorded history adjusted gravity by a fraction to compensate for the emotional density of the room. Science fiction, Marcus thought, was much more impressive when it worked quietly in the background and did not explode. He wondered, not for the first time, how he had ended up here. Court physician was a generous title for someone whose main duties involved keeping dignitaries alive through banquets designed to test the limits of alien digestion. He was competent, reliable, and blessedly forgettable. That last quality had kept him safe. In an empire built on spectacle, invisibility was a kind of armor. The Empress remained motionless, listening. Her long ears did not flicker, which Marcus knew meant she was paying very close attention. A junior aide near the front misjudged this and adjusted a robe too loudly. The sound echoed. Marcus winced in sympathy. He made a mental note to expect a stress-induced migraine request later. The speech continued. Marcus's thoughts drifted, as they often did, to medicine, to the strange comfort of controlled chaos, to the honesty of pain that did not care about rank. He found himself smiling faintly at the memory of a young patient, insisting that the diagnostic scanner was judging her. He had told her it judged everyone, and had very poor opinions overall. It had worked. She had laughed. Laughter, he believed, was the most underutilized medical technology in the empire. A ripple moved through the hall, subtle at first, like a change in pressure before a storm. Marcus straightened automatically. The environmental systems recalibrated again, this time faster. He looked toward the dais just as Empress Solenne shifted. She stood. The sound that followed was not a sound at all, but its absence. Hundreds of voices fell silent at once, translators stuttering into confusion. Marcus felt his stomach drop, a purely human reaction he had never managed to train out of himself. Empresses did not stand during formal proceedings. They did not leave their thrones. They certainly did not do so without warning. Solenne stepped down from the dais, her movement unhurried. The living crystal of the throne dimmed slightly behind her, as if uncertain what to do with itself. Marcus had a fleeting, absurd thought that it looked lonely. Then the Empress began to walk forward, and the court parted before her like matter yielding to gravity. She was coming down the central aisle. Marcus, still at the back of the hall, told himself this had nothing to do with him. Whatever unprecedented moment was unfolding, it belonged to power and politics and history, not to a doctor who still had antiseptic under his fingernails. He focused on breathing, on not fainting, on the comforting certainty that if something catastrophic happened, at least he would be well positioned to treat it. The Empress drew closer, her long ears catching the light, and Marcus realized the silence was complete. Even the hall seemed to be holding its breath. He swallowed, suddenly very aware of his boots, his posture, and the fact that he had once worn these same clothes while being vomited on by an ambassador from the outer systems. History, he thought faintly, had an odd sense of humor. The summons had arrived 3 nights earlier, delivered not by courier or announcement, but by the quiet reorientation of the air in Marcus's quarters. The temperature dropped by half a degree, the lights shifted to emergency neutral, and the wall display dissolved into the imperial medical seal. That alone told him it was serious. The seal was only used when someone important wanted help without anyone else knowing they needed it. Marcus had sighed, reached for his coat, and muttered a brief apology to the half-finished cup of tea cooling on his desk. Tea had been illegal on 3 worlds he'd visited, worshipped on 2, and once classified as a mild explosive. Tonight it was simply abandoned. The palace corridors at night felt different. During the day they were full of motion, voices, authority. At night they revealed their true nature as vast, intelligent structures that watch those who move through them. The walls adjusted their texture beneath his fingertips, reading his stress levels and offering marginally better traction. Marcus appreciated the gesture but suspected the palace would have done the same for an intruder, which raised uncomfortable questions about loyalty. 2 guards met him outside a private wing he had never entered before. They did not ask for credentials. One of them merely nodded and said, "She's frightened," as if that explained everything. Inside, the air smelled faintly metallic, threaded with antiseptic and something sharper, a chemical Marcus did not immediately recognize. His medical implants began quietly querying local systems, pulling data faster than he could consciously process. Heart rate elevated, neural activity unstable, pain response acute. The patient was small, curled in the center of a diagnostic couch, far too large for her. She looked human enough to fool an inattentive observer, but her long ears pressed flat against her head betrayed both her species and her fear. Her eyes were squeezed shut, and she was breathing the way people do when they are trying very hard not to cry and failing through sheer effort. Marcus approached slowly, making a point of letting his footsteps be heard. "Good evening," he said gently. "I'm Marcus. I promise I have no intention of doing anything impressive." One eye opened. It regarded him with deep suspicion. "That's good," she said weakly. "Impressive things hurt." He smiled despite himself. "You're absolutely right. I once tried to impress a professor and dislocated my shoulder." "Never again." Her lips twitched. It was barely there, but it was something. The scanner hovered into position on its own, emitting a soft pulse of blue light. The girl flinched. Marcus reached out and placed his hand on the casing, grounding it. "Ignore that," he said. "It's dramatic. It likes attention." "Does it judge me?" she asked. "Oh, constantly," Marcus replied. "It judges everyone. Yesterday, it called me statistically adequate. I'm still recovering." That earned him a breathy laugh, quickly cut short by pain. He moved closer, his tone shifting into the calm cadence he reserved for moments like this. The science fiction of the Empire revealed itself around them. Nanofibers adjusting to stabilize her temperature, biofields compensating for cellular distress, probability engines quietly calculating outcomes. All of it powerful, precise, and utterly useless without a frightened child's consent. He explained everything before he did it, even when she clearly didn't understand all of it, especially then. He made jokes about rebellious organs and overachieving immune responses. He told her that bravery did not mean not being scared, it meant complaining loudly while doing the thing anyway. She complained, loudly. Marcus considered it a success. When the crisis finally eased, it did so gradually, like a tide pulling back from a shore it had no right to touch. Her breathing slowed. The tension in her long ears relaxed. She looked exhausted, but calmer, anchored. "Are you important?" she asked suddenly. Marcus blinked. Oh no, very much not. She considered this. That's good. Why? Important people don't listen, she said, with the certainty of someone who had already learned too much about the universe. Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. He stood, adjusted the monitoring field one last time, and smiled down at her. You did very well, he said. If you ever need someone unimportant again, I'm excellent at it. She smiled back, small but sincere. He left that night believing, as he always did, that he had done his job and nothing more. He did not see the Empress standing in the shadows beyond the doorway, her long ears tilted forward, listening to every word. The Empress did not hurry, and that alone made the moment unbearable. Marcus watched her approach through a narrowing tunnel of bodies, each person frozen in a posture they had practiced since childhood. The hall's adaptive lighting brightened by a fractional degree, as if the building itself were trying to understand the situation and failing. Somewhere overhead, a ceremonial drone stalled mid-hover and corrected itself with a nervous whine. Marcus decided that if machines could panic, this one definitely was. He considered bowing. Then he considered that he was already at the back of the hall, half hidden behind a delegation from a mineral-rich moon, whose representatives resembled offended statues. Bowing now might draw attention. Not bowing might be worse. He settled on standing very still, a tactic that had served him well around aggressive wildlife in senior surgeons. The Empress passed the first row of nobles. Their expressions shifted in unison from dignified calm to existential dread. Marcus recognized that look. He saw it often in patients just before anesthesia took effect, the kind that silently asked whether this was how things ended. She passed generals whose armor could deflect orbital fire. They straightened, then straightened again, as if attempting to grow taller through sheer will. Marcus noted with professional curiosity that several heart rates spiked simultaneously. He made a mental note to expect follow-up consultations. By the time she reached the middle of the hall, Marcus had accepted that something catastrophic was about to happen, and that, statistically speaking, it would involve him. He tried to recall if he had violated any imperial protocols recently. He recycled waste properly. He bowed at the correct angles. He once addressed a duchess with the wrong honorific, but she had been very understanding and had only threatened him mildly. Nothing that justified this. The Empress stopped. Not beside him. Not yet. She paused several steps away, and Marcus realized with a distant sense of horror that this was worse. Pauses were for speeches. Speeches were for declarations. Declarations tended to change lives. She turned slightly, her long ears angling backward, then forward again. A gesture Marcus had learned meant deliberation. The hall waited. Even the planetary engines beneath them seemed to quiet, their low vibration easing into a respectful hush. Marcus, she said. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. His name traveled the length of the hall, carried by acoustics designed to preserve truth during trials and condemnations. Marcus felt every eye swing toward him. He took one step forward before realizing that no one had told him to move. He stopped. His foot hovered for a moment, then settled. It felt important. Yes, he said, immediately regretting the lack of a title, an honorific, or any coherent thought. The Empress studied him. Up close, her resemblance to a human woman was striking, unsettling even. The differences announced themselves in subtler ways. The precision of her movements, the stillness between breaths, the long ears that now tilted toward him, attentive. You appear surprised, she said. Marcus laughed. It escaped him before he could stop it. A short, breathless sound. I try not to be, he replied, but I'm failing impressively. A murmur rippled through the court. Humor was not forbidden exactly, but it was highly regulated. Marcus braced himself. Instead, the Empress's mouth curved, just slightly. The movement was small enough that half the hall might have imagined it, but Marcus saw it clearly. Come, she said, gesturing to the space beside him. Marcus looked behind himself, just to be certain there was not another Marcus lurking there. There was not. He took a careful step sideways, making room, and she sat. She did not sit above him. She did not sit ahead of him. She sat beside him. The throne at the far end of the hall remained empty, its crystal surface dimming further, confused and, Marcus suspected, deeply offended. The silence became absolute. Up close, Marcus could hear the quiet hum of Solenne's personal field, a sophisticated lattice of energy that protected her from toxins, weapons, and unwanted proximity. It adjusted as she leaned slightly toward him, recalibrating for shared space. The sensation was like standing near a warm window on a cold day. "I owe you thanks," she said softly, her voice now meant only for him. Marcus swallowed. "I'm happy to. I'm not sure for what. You're—" He stopped himself, unsure whether sitting beside her made titles inappropriate or dangerously necessary. "For my daughter," Solenne said. The world snapped into focus. Understanding arrived not as relief but as weight. Marcus nodded slowly. "She was very brave," he said, "also very stubborn." Solenne's long ears shifted, an unmistakable sign of fondness. "So I am told." "She asked me if I was important," Marcus added, because apparently his mouth had stopped listening to his brain. "I told her no." Solenne considered him for a moment, then looked out at her court, at the rigid ranks and carefully neutral faces. "You were wrong," she said, "but not in the way you think." She leaned closer, and Marcus became acutely aware that the most powerful being in the Empire smelled faintly of ozone and something floral he could not place. "My daughter remembers who listened to her," Solenne continued. "She remembers who made her laugh when she was afraid. She asked that I thank you." Marcus exhaled. "This is a very thorough thank you." Solenne allowed herself a quiet breath of amusement. "I wanted everyone to understand what earns my attention." They sat together for a moment longer, the Empress and the unimportant doctor, while the hall remained frozen in awe. Then Solenne stood, her field pulling back, the warmth receding. As she walked back toward her throne, the noise of the world slowly returned. Marcus remained where he was, heart pounding, aware that his life had shifted irreversibly. History, he thought, was still laughing. The sound returned to the hall in cautious layers, as if reality itself was unsure whether it was permitted to resume. A single throat cleared somewhere near the front. A translator coughed, then apologized in 3 languages at once. The environmental systems recalibrated again, overshooting slightly, and Marcus felt a brief, unseasonable warmth at his ankles before the floor corrected itself. Solenne had resumed her throne. The living crystal brightened, relieved to have purpose again, and reshaped itself around her, with something that looked suspiciously like pride. The ceremony continued as if it had merely paused for a dramatic breath, though the speaker now read from the script with the haunted focus of someone who had witnessed a god take a seat in the wrong place. Marcus did not move. He was keenly aware that moving would attract attention, and attention was now his enemy. He stood exactly where he had been standing when the Empress rose, hands folded, expression neutral, mind racing with the speed and discipline of a man trained to respond to emergencies. Unfortunately, this emergency involved no bleeding, no visible injuries, and no protocol he had ever been taught. The first whisper reached him from his left. A low, urgent hiss filtered through a translation field. "Was that planned?" Marcus kept his eyes forward. "If it was," he murmured back, "someone forgot to inform me." Another whisper, this one trembling. "Did you threaten her?" He allowed himself a sideways glance. The speaker was pale, sweating, and wearing robes that probably cost more than Marcus's entire education. "I once recommended fewer ceremonial stairs," Marcus said. "That's the worst I've done." The whispers multiplied, skittering along the back of the hall like startled insects. Marcus became a fixed point in a shifting web of speculation. He felt oddly calm, the way he sometimes did when a situation grew so absurd that panic no longer seemed productive. He focused on details, the way the light refracted off Solenne's long ears as she listened, the faint hum of the probability engines below, recalculating futures at an accelerated rate. The speech ended. Applause followed, uneven and uncertain, like a storm testing the ground. Marcus clapped when appropriate, careful not to appear enthusiastic or offended. He wondered if there was a correct level of clapping for having been sat beside by an empress. There probably was. He had missed that lecture. As the hall began to empty, movement resumed with exaggerated politeness. People avoided Marcus with the careful distance usually reserved for unstable wildlife or unexploded ordnance. Others lingered too close, smiling with the intensity of those who had decided he might be useful. He recognized the look. It was the same one patients wore when they suddenly remembered your name after ignoring you for years. A junior official approached him, eyes darting. "Physician Marcus," she said, voice strained into formality. "Her Radiance requests that you remain available." Marcus nodded. "I was planning to remain vertical," he replied. "This fits nicely." She blinked, uncertain whether she had been insulted, then hurried away. Time stretched. The hall emptied further. The great doors sealed themselves with a sound like distant thunder, leaving only essential personnel and those too important to be asked to leave. Marcus found himself still standing at the back, now very visible, now very alone. "Doctor?" He turned. Solenne stood a short distance away, no longer elevated, her presence no less imposing for it. Up close, without the theater of the throne, she seemed more real, more solid. Her long ears angled slightly forward, attentive but relaxed. "I thought," Marcus said carefully, "that I had used up my allotted surprise for the evening." "You misunderstand," Solenne replied. "You have merely exhausted the courts." She gestured, and the space around them subtly altered. A privacy field blossomed, soft and translucent, muting the outside world. Marcus felt the shift in his implants, the familiar sensation of being temporarily removed from probability. It was an expensive field. He wondered idly if it came with maintenance costs. "My daughter is recovering well," Solenne said. "I'm glad," Marcus replied. "She has opinions about pudding." Solenne's mouth curved. "She informed me." They stood in silence for a moment. Marcus realized belatedly that he was alone with the Empress of the known systems, and that she was waiting for him to speak. He cleared his throat. "If I've caused any disruption," he began. "You have," Solenne said evenly. Marcus winced. "And it was necessary," she continued. "This court understands displays of power. It struggles with displays of gratitude." He considered that. "Gratitude is harder to armor against," he said. Solenne inclined her head. "Precisely." She studied him then, openly. Not as a ruler appraising a subject, but as a woman evaluating a variable she had not anticipated. Marcus resisted the urge to straighten his coat or apologize for existing. "You treated my daughter as a person," Solenne said. "Not an heir, not a symbol, a person." Marcus shrugged, a small movement. "Children tend to notice when you don't." "My daughter noticed," Solenne said, "and she asked me why kindness was rare." Marcus felt the humor drain from him for a moment, replaced by something quieter. "What did you tell her?" "I told her," Solenne said, "that kindness is common, courage is common, but power teaches people to hide both." She deactivated the privacy field. The world rushed back in, cautious and observant. "You may go," Solenne said. Marcus hesitated. "With respect, Your Radiance, will this make things difficult?" Solenne's long ears tilted, a gesture that might have been amusement. "It already has." She turned and walked away, leaving Marcus standing in the echoing hall, newly aware that his life had not changed because an empress sat beside him. It had changed because she had stood up. By the next morning, Marcus discovered that fame had a smell. It was faint but persistent, a mixture of expensive fabric, nervous perspiration, and recycled air that lingered in corridors long after people passed through them. It followed him as he walked toward the medical wing, a place he had once believed immune to politics. He now knew better. Politics, it turned out, respected no sterile boundary. He passed two aides who stopped talking the instant they saw him. One bowed too deeply and nearly collided with a service drone. The drone, offended, emitted a sharp corrective tone and drifted away with bureaucratic dignity. Marcus pretended none of this was happening and focused on the comforting hum of medical systems booting up around him. Inside his office, the lights adjusted to his biometric signature. The diagnostic console greeted him by name and asked if he would like to review yesterday's incident reports. Marcus declined. He had lived through them. Once was enough. He was halfway through checking a patient's regenerative cycle when the door chimed. "Dr. Marcus," said a voice layered with formality and anxiety, "you are requested in Conference Chamber 3. Marcus sighed. "Of course I am." Conference Chamber 3 was never used for actual conferences. It was used for things that wanted to look like conferences but were, in fact, interrogations with refreshments. When Marcus arrived, he found 4 officials already seated, their long robes arranged just so, their faces carefully neutral. "Please," one of them said, gesturing to a chair. "Sit." Marcus sat. The chair adjusted to him automatically, a small mercy. "We are conducting a routine clarification," another official began. Marcus nodded. "I clarify routinely." A pause. "Your interaction with Her Radiance yesterday was unexpected." "That's one word for it," Marcus said. Another pause. Longer this time. "We require context." Marcus leaned back slightly. "She thanked me." Silence. "For?" someone pressed. "For doing my job," Marcus said. "Badly dressed and with jokes." One official frowned. "You are suggesting that humor influenced imperial conduct." Marcus considered this. "I'm suggesting that a scared child laughed and her mother noticed." That landed differently. He could feel it. The tension in the room shifted, recalibrating like a faulty gravity field. "You understand," the first official said carefully, "that favor carries obligations." Marcus smiled faintly. "I understand that if obligations start telling me how to treat patients, I'll become very uncooperative." Another pause. Someone cleared their throat. "You are dismissed," the first official said at last. Marcus stood. That went better than expected. Outside, he nearly collided with a familiar figure. "Doctor," a young technician hissed, grabbing his sleeve. "What did you do?" Marcus looked down at the hand on his arm. "I made a child laugh," he said. "It's my most dangerous skill." She stared at him as if he'd confessed to bending space-time with sarcasm. By midday, the rumors had mutated into something almost impressive. Marcus heard at least 3 versions of the story in passing. That he was Solenne's secret advisor, that he had cured an incurable illness, that he had insulted the throne and survived. The last one was his favorite. He retreated to the quietest place he knew, the pediatric wing. The air there was warmer, the lights softer. Children from half a dozen systems occupied recovery pods, their physiology supported by a symphony of technology that adapted moment by moment. Marcus felt his shoulders ease. This was where reality made sense. "She asked for you," a nurse told him, gesturing toward a private alcove. Inside, the Empress's daughter lay propped up by cushions that reshaped themselves when she shifted. Her long ears twitched when she saw him. "You're famous now," she said. Marcus groaned. "I was hoping that was temporary." "They talk about you," she continued. "They say you're brave." "I once hid behind a food cart to avoid a meeting," Marcus said. "Tell no one." She smiled. "Mama sat next to you." "Yes," Marcus said carefully. "She did. She said it was important." Marcus crouched beside her bed. "It was important to her. And to me," the girl said. She hesitated, then added, "I told her you weren't important like other people." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Oh, you were important the right way." He felt something warm and unsteady settle in his chest. "That might be the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me." Later, as he left the wing, Marcus found Solenne waiting near the observation window, her reflection layered over the stars beyond. She turned as he approached, her long ears angled in a way he was beginning to recognize as thoughtful. "She is improving," Solenne said. "She will," Marcus replied. "Children are remarkably resilient. They bend, not break." Solenne studied him. "You have complicated my court." Marcus smiled tiredly. "I have that effect on systems." They stood together in silence, watching a distant ship slip into fold space, its outline stretching into impossible geometry before vanishing. "You could have accepted advantage," Solenne said. "You did not." Marcus shrugged. "I didn't see the need." Solenne's gaze softened, just slightly. "That," she said, "is precisely why I stood." She turned and left him there, staring at the stars, aware that humor and kindness had altered the trajectory of an empire, and that somehow, impossibly, it had not yet altered who he was. By the 6th day after the ceremony, the palace had begun to reorganize itself around Marcus without asking his permission. It was subtle at first. His access routes changed. Doors opened a fraction sooner. Elevators paused longer when he stepped inside, as if uncertain whether to ask him a question. His wrist implant began receiving invitations that pretended not to be invitations. Informational briefings, optional luncheons, courtesy consultations. He declined most of them and all of the luncheons. The last time he had accepted one, he had been seated between two officials who argued for 40 minutes about trade tariffs while eating something that attempted to crawl off the plate. He learned quickly that refusing politely was now considered a statement. This made his work harder. Patients hesitated when he entered the room. Some straightened, some bowed, which Marcus immediately discouraged by sitting down himself. Once a minor noble attempted to thank him for services not rendered, and Marcus had to explain gently that gratitude for hypothetical kindness was best saved for the future, preferably after something actually happened. "You're different now," a colleague said to him in a hushed voice near the sterilization field. "I showered," Marcus replied. "That's probably it." She did not laugh. That worried him more than the attention. The empire ran on perception. Marcus had always existed beneath it, a functional constant. Now perception bent around him, and he did not like the physics of it. He found himself missing invisibility the way one missed gravity only after it failed. The summons came during the third hour of his shift, delivered by a courier drone whose polished surface reflected his increasingly tired face. "Her Radiance requests your presence," it said, voice perfectly neutral. Marcus stared at it. "Does she specify why?" "No," the drone replied. "She rarely does." "Of course she doesn't," Marcus muttered, already removing his gloves. This time the route led not to the throne room or a conference chamber, but to the upper observatory. Marcus had been there once before, years ago when a visiting delegation had fainted simultaneously at the sight of three stars collapsing into one another. He suspected that was not today's purpose. Solenne stood near the transparent arc of the dome, hands clasped behind her back, her long ears outlined against the slow rotation of the galaxy beyond. Without the weight of ceremony, she seemed almost quiet. "You sent for me," Marcus said. "Yes," Solenne replied. "And you came." He shrugged. "You have very convincing architecture." She allowed a brief smile. "Sit with me." There was no throne here, only a simple bench grown from the same living material as the palace itself. Marcus sat, leaving careful space. Solenne sat beside him anyway, close enough that her personal field brushed his arm, warm and steady. "For generations," she said, "my people believed power required distance." Marcus nodded. "Distance is excellent for preventing conversations." "And for preventing understanding," Solenne added. "I was taught that closeness weakens authority." Marcus glanced at her. "And now?" "And now," she said, "my court is terrified because I violated an assumption." "That does tend to unsettle systems," Marcus said. "I once rearranged a supply closet and caused a minor rebellion." Solenne huffed softly, an unmistakable sound of amusement. "You speak lightly of heavy things." "I survived them that way." She turned to face him fully. "They are watching you." "I've noticed," Marcus said. I waved. It did not help. "They will attempt to attach meaning to you," Solenne continued. "Ambition, strategy, influence." Marcus frowned. "I have none of those. I barely plan meals." "That," Solenne said, "is why you are dangerous to them." He let that settle. Outside, a massive ship slid past the observatory, its hull bending space into graceful distortions. Science fiction at its most elegant, he thought. Vast, incomprehensible, indifferent. "I didn't ask for this," Marcus said quietly. "I know," Solenne replied. "That is why I trust you." He looked at her then, really looked, at the weight she carried, at the long ears that marked her as other, and the eyes that revealed her as profoundly human. "What do you want from me?" he asked. Solenne considered the stars. "Nothing more than what you already give," she said. "Honesty, kindness, the refusal to pretend." Marcus exhaled. "That's manageable." She stood. The observatory systems adjusted instantly, light and gravity responding to her presence. "You may find," she said, "that the empire changes around you despite your best efforts." Marcus stood as well. "I'll try not to trip over it." Solenne paused at the doorway. "Dr. Marcus." "Yes?" My daughter asked me something yesterday. Marcus felt a familiar tightening. That's never trivial. She asked whether emperors are allowed to be grateful, Solenne said. And what did you tell her? I told her, Solenne replied, that gratitude is not a weakness, but it must be demonstrated. She left him there alone beneath the stars, feeling once again that history had leaned just slightly off balance, and that somehow humor and compassion were now part of the equation. The palace returned to its routines with the stubborn insistence of an organism that refused to admit it had been changed. Ceremonies resumed, corridors filled, probability engines recalculated futures that now contained a small but irritating variable named Marcus. He noticed it in the way people spoke more carefully around him, in the way doors no longer hesitated but committed. The Empire had accepted him, not as a threat, not as a symbol, but as a fact. He found that strangely comforting. On the morning everything finally settled, Marcus arrived at the medical wing to find his schedule suspiciously empty. The diagnostic console blinked at him, then displayed a single message: administrative adjustment complete. He stared at it for a long moment. Well, he said aloud, that's ominous. The door chimed. A courier entered, bowed with appropriate restraint, and handed him a data slate. From Her Radiance, the courier said, then fled as if afraid the slate might explode. Marcus sighed and activated it. The message was brief. No titles, no ceremony. Thank you. Solenne. He smiled despite himself. You're welcome, he murmured to the empty room. Later that day, he found himself summoned once more to the Hall of Continuance, though this time without secrecy or drama. The hall looked the same as ever, vast, luminous, humming with the quiet machinery of empire. Yet Marcus felt different standing there. Not taller, not braver, simply more present. The Empress sat on her throne, long ears relaxed, posture composed. At her side stood her daughter, smaller than the throne, but larger than she had been days ago. Her confidence returned, her eyes bright. Marcus stopped at a respectful distance. You may approach, Solenne said. Marcus did, carefully. The court watched, alert, but no longer shocked. He noted that. Progress, he supposed, came in measured doses. My daughter wished to see you, Solenne said. The girl stepped forward. I wanted to say goodbye, she said. Mama says I'm going to the outer gardens. Ah, Marcus said solemnly. The place where boredom goes to die? She laughed. Solenne's long ears tilted, amused. Thank you, the girl said, for listening. Marcus knelt slightly so they were closer to eye level. Anytime, he said. If you ever need someone unimportant again, I'm available. She considered this, then nodded gravely, as if sealing a treaty. The court exhaled as one. Solenne rose, not to descend this time, but to stand as she was meant to. Let it be known, she said, voice carrying without effort, that Marcus remains what he has always been, a physician, no more, no less. A murmur of agreement rippled through the hall. And let it also be known, she continued, that kindness shown without expectation is worthy of recognition. Marcus felt heat rise to his face. He resisted the urge to hide behind the nearest pillar. When it was over, truly over, he found himself back where he belonged. In the medical wing, sleeves rolled, hands steady, listening to the quiet hum of lives continuing. Patients spoke to him normally again. Some joked, some complained. One attempted to bribe him with contraband pudding. He confiscated it for medical reasons. As the day ended, Marcus stood by the observation window, watching ships fold space and vanish into distances he would never travel. Solenne joined him without announcement, her presence now familiar. The court has adapted, she said. They usually do, Marcus replied. Eventually. You have adapted as well. Marcus thought about that. I suppose I've learned that being seen isn't the same as being changed. Solenne regarded him. You no longer hide. I still hide, Marcus said. I just don't pretend it's humility. She smiled, a real one this time, unguarded. That is growth. They stood together in silence, ruler and physician, watching the empire move forward, slightly altered. When Solenne left, Marcus remained a moment longer. He felt no urge to follow, no desire for more. He had what he needed: purpose, perspective, The quiet satisfaction of having mattered, not because of power, but because of care. He turned back toward the corridors, toward patience and problems and jokes that made fear manageable. The empire continued. So did he. And that, Marcus decided, was more than enough.